Some maps show lands that were not yet discovered. This is one of history's most captivating puzzles, and by the end of this exploration, you will possess a completely new framework for understanding our past. We will examine ancient charts that depict the icy coast of Antarctica centuries before any recorded voyage, and others that outline the Americas before Columbus ever set sail. Were these products of forgotten explorers, brilliant guesswork, or whispers from a civilization lost to time? What does it truly mean to discover something if the map already exists? That single surviving fragment, drawn on gazelle skin in Constantinople, holds a secret that has sparked debate for over a century. The Piri Reis map of 1513 is a breathtaking artifact, a vibrant collage of knowledge from across the known world. Its creator, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, wrote detailed notes in the margins, explaining that he consulted 20 different source charts to create this masterwork. Among those sources, he claimed, were maps from the time of Alexander the Great. This is the first crucial clue. The map itself is a marvel of its era, showing Europe, North Africa, and the coast of Brazil with remarkable clarity. But it is the land drawn south of the Atlantic that ignites the fire of speculation. A long, curving coastline stretches eastward from the southern tip of South America. To many modern eyes, this landmass looks unmistakably like the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica, a coastline that has been hidden under a colossal sheet of ice for thousands upon thousands of years. The official discovery of that frozen continent, remember, would not occur for another 300 years. So what exactly are we looking at? Mainstream historical interpretation offers a compelling, grounded explanation. Scholars suggest this controversial land is simply a distorted, early attempt to map the extended coast of Patagonia, perhaps merged with speculative geography about a great southern land that classical thinkers believed must exist to balance the northern continents. The map's own notes support this, as Piri Reis describes the region as warm, with large snakes, details utterly incompatible with the Antarctic reality. Yet, for those drawn to the mystery, this explanation feels incomplete. If it is just a misdrawn Patagonia, why does its shape align so provocatively with subglacial surveys of Antarctica, charts that only became possible with 20th century technology? Could the Admiral's ancient sources have preserved a memory of the continent from a time before the ice, a fragment of knowledge from a civilization lost to the depths of prehistory? The Piri Reis map does not give us answers. Instead, it presents us with a powerful, enduring question. It challenges the clean timeline we are taught, forcing us to wonder if discovery is not a moment, but a rediscovery, a piece of a puzzle that was scattered long ago. And this is merely our starting point, because this pattern of impossible geography does not stand alone. The debate over the Piri Reis map centers on a coastline that should not have been known. But what happens when a map names a place that history remembers, yet the document itself stands accused of being a lie? This is the intricate puzzle of the Vineland Map. On its surface, it is a seemingly modest sketch, drawn on aged vellum and bound within a medieval manuscript. Its most extraordinary feature is a large, jagged island in the western Atlantic, labeled in Latin as Vinlanda Insula. According to the text on the map, this land was visited by Leif Erikson and his crew around the year 1000. If this artifact is genuine, created around 1440, it would be nothing less than the earliest known map to show any part of the Americas, predating Columbus's famous voyage by more than 50 years. It would be concrete, cartographic proof that Norse knowledge of a world across the ocean persisted in European circles for centuries. The implications would reshape our understanding of the pre-Columbian world. But the story of the Vineland Map is not one of simple discovery. It is a masterclass in historical skepticism. From the moment it was revealed to the public in 1965, it was shrouded in controversy. The detective work began with the very materials that composed it. Scientists subjected the map to intense scrutiny. The vellum was authentic, dating to the correct century. The real question was the ink. Medieval ink was typically iron gall, made from oak galls and iron salts. Initial tests seemed to confirm this, but later, more advanced analysis revealed a troubling detail. Traces of a synthetic compound called anatase, a specific form of titanium dioxide, were found within the ink lines. This compound, critics argued, was not produced in a pure form until the 20th century. The presence of this modern pigment became the primary evidence for declaring the map an elaborate and brilliant forgery. Yet, even this verdict is not the final word. Proponents of the map's authenticity point to ongoing research suggesting anatase could occur naturally or as a period contaminant. They argue the map's geographic content is too nuanced, too consistent with Norse sagas, to have been fabricated by a modern forger without access to information that scholars themselves were only just piecing together in the 1950s. This back and forth turns the Vineland Map into something more than parchment and ink. It becomes a symbol. It represents the tantalizing fragility of historical evidence and the human longing to find a tangible link to a legendary past. Whether it is a genuine medieval document or an exquisite fake, its power lies in the profound questions it forces us to ask. How much knowledge of the Norse voyages truly circulated in medieval Europe and then was simply lost? What other records might have vanished, leaving only a ghost of a hint in a later forgery's design? The map's contested authenticity teaches us that sometimes the most compelling historical mysteries are not about what is clearly true or false, but about the shadowy, uncertain space in between. The shadowy space between truth and forgery is not the only realm where maps challenge history. Sometimes they present a tapestry where real and imagined lands are stitched together with such confidence they can mislead explorers for generations. This is the legacy of the Zeno map, published in Venice in 1558. Its creator, Niccolò Zeno, presented it not as a new creation, but as a reconstruction of voyages undertaken by his own ancestors, the Zeno brothers, nearly 200 years earlier. According to the accompanying narrative, these Venetian nobles sailed into the frigid North Atlantic in the late 1300s, reaching lands far beyond the known world. The map itself is a cartographic chimera. It shows Greenland with a shape that is startlingly recognizable, especially for a time when most European charts depicted it as a vague, mythical peninsula. But then, the imagination of the map, or perhaps of its sources, takes flight. To the west of Greenland, it plots several mysterious lands. Estetiland appears as a sizable island, described in the text as a rich country with sophisticated people who brewed beer and had their own libraries. Further south lies Drogeo, a wilder place said to be inhabited by cannibals, a term often used loosely by medieval writers for any unfamiliar and seemingly primitive culture. To modern researchers, these descriptions read like a distorted echo of contacts with the northeastern coast of North America, possibly Newfoundland or Labrador, filtered through decades of storytelling and literary embellishment. Yet the Zeno map's most enduring and troublesome contribution was neither Greenland nor these speculative western lands, but a complete fiction placed squarely in the middle of the North Atlantic, a sizable island labeled Friesland. For over 2 centuries, this phantom island was copied faithfully from map to map, its existence taken as geographical fact. It appeared on the charts of serious navigators, and expeditions were even launched to find it, wasting resources and lives in pursuit of a land that only existed on parchment. The Zeno map, therefore, embodies a dual mystery. On one hand, it potentially preserves a kernel of genuine pre-Columbian geographic knowledge, a hazy memory of the Norse sphere of influence in Greenland and perhaps beyond, passed down through a Venetian family's papers. On the other, it demonstrates with perfect clarity how a compelling story, once committed to a map, could harden into accepted reality, creating obstacles to true discovery. It reminds us that ancient maps are not just windows to forgotten truths. They are also records of powerful beliefs, and sometimes the most persistent features on a chart are the ones born entirely from error. But if northern maps wove myth and reality into a confusing braid, one southern chart would present a vision of a continent so precise and advanced, it seems to defy the very era of its creation. The phantom islands of the north were born from error and embellishment, but in the south, a different kind of map emerged from the mind of a scientific theorist. In 1737, the French geographer Philippe Buache published a map that was, by his own admission, a work of hypothesis. He was attempting to synthesize scattered reports from explorers who had glimpsed icy barriers and fog-shrouded coastlines in the far southern seas. Buache was a believer in the idea of symmetrical landmasses, a theoretical framework that suggested a large southern continent must exist to balance the northern ones. His map was his prediction of what that continent might look like. What he drew was not a single, solid landmass. Instead, he depicted Antarctica as two distinct, large islands, separated from each other by a narrow, frozen sea channel. For over 2 centuries, this was viewed as an interesting but ultimately incorrect guess, a speculative cartographic exercise. Then, in the mid-20th century, technology gave us new eyes. Advanced sonar and radar began to map the bedrock of Antarctica, the actual land that lies beneath miles of accumulated ice. The results were staggering. The continent is, in fact, divided by a massive transantarctic mountain range. If all the ice were to miraculously vanish, much of central Antarctica would indeed be a sea, separating the land into 2 primary landmasses, one east and one west. The correlation between Buache's 18th century speculation and the subglacial reality is, to put it mildly, provocative. So how do we explain this? The mainstream and most likely explanation is one of brilliant scientific deduction meeting sheer coincidence. Buache was working with real, if fragmentary, data from voyages that had approached the continent's periphery. He applied his theories of geographical symmetry and river basin patterns, extrapolating a possible interior structure. The fact that his educated guess bears any resemblance to the truth could be a testament to his skill and a stroke of incredible luck. Yet, the mystery deepens when we ask a more radical question. Could Buache have had access to source materials that are now lost to history, maps or descriptions passed down from an antiquity that possessed a forgotten understanding of the world? It is a tantalizing thought, but one for which there is no direct evidence in Buache's own writings. He presented his work as theory, not rediscovery. The true power of the Buache map lies in the philosophical challenge it presents. It forces us to separate the act of physical discovery from the act of conceptual understanding. A person can map a coastline from a ship, confirming its existence, but another person, sitting in a study thousands of miles away, can piece together clues and theories to envision the true nature of a place long before any ship ever reaches its shore. Buache's map suggests that discovery is not always a sudden encounter. It can also be a slow dawning, a puzzle solved in the mind long before it is confirmed by the eye. This idea that knowledge can exist in a conceptual form, waiting for technology to verify it, turns our attention from the icy south to the ancient civilizations of the east, where a different set of maps suggests a conceptual grasp of the world that seems to defy its time. While Buache envisioned a continent's hidden structure, another map from the same era captured a coastline with a clarity that history itself would later blur. In 1559, the Ottoman cartographer Hadji Ahmed produced a world map of breathtaking scope and peculiar precision. Its most striking feature is the western edge of the New World. Here, the map shows the long, slender arm of California connected firmly to the mainland, depicted correctly as a peninsula. This was not a minor detail. For nearly 200 years after this map was created, a persistent and profound cartographic error took hold. European maps, based on misinterpreted reports and conflated voyages, began to show California as a large island separated from the continent by a mythical sea called the Strait of Anian. This mistake became so entrenched that it was copied for generations, a phantom island stubbornly drawn on charts long after explorers had physically walked the land connection. Hadji Ahmed's map, however, got it right from the start, preserving a geographical truth that would be lost and then rediscovered centuries later. But the mysteries of this chart do not end with California. Look north and the map presents an even more compelling puzzle. The narrow body of water separating Asia from North America, what we know as the Bering Strait, is rendered with an accuracy that seems to anticipate the understanding of a much later age. The proportions, the alignment, the suggestion of a close proximity between the two continents, it all feels remarkably prescient for a map crafted decades before Vitus Bering's official 18th century voyage that gave the strait its name. This precision in a region so remote from the Ottoman Empire's sphere of influence raises a fascinating question. Where did Hadji Ahmed's information come from? Scholars note that his map is a synthesis, a compilation likely drawn from Portuguese, Spanish, and Arab sources available in the cosmopolitan trading hubs of the Ottoman world. Yet, the specific, accurate data concerning the far northwestern reaches of America hints at knowledge streams flowing outside the familiar European channels. Some researchers point to the possibility of lost Asian sources. Could information from Chinese treasure fleets of the early 1400s, or from unrecorded Japanese or Russian voyages along the northern Pacific Rim, have filtered westward through Silk Road networks or maritime trade? These are speculative threads, but they underscore a vital point the Hadji Ahmed map makes visible. The story of global geography was not written by a single culture in a linear march of discovery. It was a patchwork quilt stitched together from fragments of knowledge traded in bazaars, copied in monastic scriptoria, and shared in port cities across the world. This map is a silent witness to that vibrant, forgotten exchange, a testament to a more interconnected pre-modern world than our traditional histories often allow. It challenges the Eurocentric narrative not by shouting, but by simply showing a coastline correctly when others would soon get it wrong, and showing a distant strait with a quiet confidence that suggests its maker had access to a truly global pool of wisdom. This shifts our gaze from the edges of the map, from coastlines and straits, to the vast, blank spaces within. For if these charts hint at knowledge of continental outlines, what about the interiors? What secrets might lie hidden in the representation of lands far from any shore? Our journey now turns inward to the heart of a continent and a map that seems to hold the blueprint of a legendary city. While the Hadji Ahmed map hinted at a global exchange of knowledge, another chart was born from a far more dangerous and secretive trade. The Cantino Planisphere, created in 1502, is not just a map, it is an artifact of international espionage. Its very existence was an act of theft. An Italian agent named Alberto Cantino, working for the Duke of Ferrara, was stationed in Lisbon with one mission: to acquire the most closely guarded secrets of the Portuguese crown. The knowledge locked away in the Royal Cartographic Archives was worth more than any chest of jewels, for it contained the outlines of the world being unveiled by Portuguese caravels. Cantino succeeded, smuggling this magnificent chart out of Portugal and into Italy. The map he stole is breathtaking in its detail, showing the west coast of Africa, the Indian Ocean, and the newly found lands across the Atlantic. Its depiction of the Brazilian coastline, in particular, is what fuels a deep historical mystery. Portuguese explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral is officially credited with discovering Brazil in 1500. Yet the Cantino Planisphere, drawn just 2 years later, shows that coastline with a startling level of accuracy and detail. The contours of the shore, the placement of rivers, the overall shape, it all feels too refined, too confident to be the product of a single, hurried voyage of discovery. This precision whispers a provocative possibility. Could the Portuguese have known about Brazil before Cabral's celebrated landing? The idea of secret, unrecorded voyages is not as far-fetched as it sounds. During this feverish period of rivalry between Spain and Portugal, knowledge was the ultimate currency. The Treaty of Tordesillas had divided the unknown world between the two empires, and accidentally stumbling upon lands in your rival's zone could lead to diplomatic crisis or war. If a Portuguese captain had sighted the Brazilian coast earlier, perhaps blown off course on the well-traveled Vol to Dumas route to the Cape of Good Hope, that information would have been a state secret of the highest order. It would have been hidden, studied, and mapped in strictest confidence, waiting for the politically opportune moment to claim it. The Cantino Planisphere, therefore, does more than show a coastline. It exposes the hidden machinery of the age of discovery. It reminds us that the history we read is often a polished narrative, the official story released after the fact. The real first sightings, the initial moments of contact, may have occurred in silence, recorded only on secret charts that were later lost or destroyed. This map is a rare survivor, a stolen snapshot of the world as one empire secretly understood it, proving that the race to map the globe was run not just on the high seas, but in the shadows of royal courts and the hands of paid spies. This shadowy world of state secrets stands in stark contrast to the next map we will examine, which emerged not from clandestine archives, but from the brilliant, singular mind of one of history's most celebrated polymaths. The world of secret charts and stolen knowledge was a closed circuit of power, but one map would break that circuit and broadcast a new idea to all of Europe. In the small German town of Saint-Dié in 1507, a scholar named Martin Waldseemuller was preparing a document that would forever change how humanity saw itself. His great world map and the accompanying book introduced a word that now defines two continents, America. He chose this name to honor the Florentine explorer and merchant Amerigo Vespucci, whose published letters described sailing along a seemingly endless coastline in the southern hemisphere. Vespucci's crucial insight, which Waldseemuller seized upon, was that this landmass was not a fringe of Asia, but an entirely new continent, a fourth part of the world. This was a conceptual earthquake. For centuries, the European geographical imagination had been bounded by three continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Now here was a fourth, and Waldseemuller gave it a name. But the map's true, silent revolution lies not in its label, but in its empty space. Between this new continent and Asia, Waldseemuller drew a vast, open ocean. He depicted the Pacific, years before Vasco Núñez de Balboa would struggle through the jungles of Panama to become the first European to see it in 1513, and more than a decade before Magellan would cross its terrifying expanse. How could he possibly know it was there? Waldseemuller made a breathtaking intellectual leap. By piecing together Vespucci's accounts of sailing south along the eastern coast of South America and combining them with other fragmented reports, he inferred a staggering truth. If this land was a continent blocking the way west, and if ships sailing east from Africa could reach Asia, then there must be another ocean on the other side of this new land to connect the two. He did not have the data, he had the logic. He connected the dots across a global puzzle with sheer reasoning. The Waldseemuller map is therefore a monument not to exploration, but to understanding. It represents the moment a brilliant mind looked at incomplete information and saw the whole picture, reshaping the world through inference before a single ship could confirm it. It is a testament to the power of an idea. Yet, this very act of courageous naming and conceptual mapping stands in stark, almost bewildering contrast to another chart from the same era, one that seems to operate on a completely different and far more ancient set of rules. The bold intellectual leap of Waldseemuller was a vision of the world as it could be reasoned, but another map from just a few decades earlier presents a vision of the world as it supposedly was. In 1531, the French cartographer Oronce Finé published a world map that contains one of the most visually arresting and hotly debated features in all of historical cartography. At the bottom of his chart, centered almost perfectly over the South Pole, lies a massive, detailed landmass labeled Terra Australis. This is not a vague, speculative outline. The Oronce Finé map depicts this southern continent with a stunning array of geographical features. We see what appear to be deep, branching river systems flowing from mountainous interiors toward a complex, indented coastline. There are bays, inlets, and peninsulas rendered with a specificity that feels observational, not theoretical. For those who see evidence of a lost prehistoric civilization, this map is a cornerstone of their argument. They point out that the continent is positioned with rough accuracy, its size is plausible, and most compellingly, its interior details, like those river valleys, align suggestively with modern subglacial surveys of Antarctica's bedrock. The central claim is stark: this level of detail could not have been invented. It must have been copied from a far older source map, drafted during a period when Antarctica was free of its immense ice cap, a time thousands of years before recorded history. It is a claim that, if true, would shatter our understanding of human technological and exploratory achievement. The mainstream historical and cartographic view offers a different, layered explanation. Skeptics remind us of the powerful, centuries-old belief in a necessary southern continent, the Terra Australis Incognita, which was considered a geographical certainty to balance the landmasses of the north. By the 1530s, European voyagers had begun to brush against the edges of the real Antarctica, bringing back reports of a vast, cold land. Phineas, they argue, was doing what all great cartographers of his time did, synthesizing. He likely combined these new, fragmented reports with much older classical descriptions of southern lands, perhaps even conflating them with the recently discovered but misunderstood geography of Tierra del Fuego, the archipelago at the tip of South America. The rivers and bays on his map, then, are not memories of an ice-free Antarctica, but a brilliant, educated composite, a best guess that wove together real data, ancient theory, and the artistic conventions of map-making. This debate over the Oronce Finé map is more than an academic quarrel. It is the very essence of the mystery surrounding all these anomalous charts. It presents us with a clear fork in the road of interpretation. Down one path lies the extraordinary conclusion that our history books are missing entire chapters written by advanced seafarers in deep antiquity. Down the other lies the principle of parsimony, that the simplest explanation using known historical contexts and human ingenuity is usually correct. The map itself does not adjudicate, it simply exists, a silent, detailed, and profoundly provocative artifact. It forces each of us to weigh the evidence and ask, where does brilliant synthesis end and impossible knowledge begin? To find another perspective on this question, we must leave the European tradition entirely and turn our gaze to the sophisticated cartographic sciences of the East. The debate between brilliant synthesis and impossible knowledge finds a fascinating parallel far from Europe. In the royal court of Korea, in the year 1402, scholars completed a map of breathtaking ambition. Known as the Kangnido, its full title translates to the Map of Integrated Lands and Regions of Historical Countries and Capitals. This was not a nautical chart for sailors, but a scholarly masterpiece, a philosophical statement about the entire known world drawn on silk. At first glance, its center is dominated by the Middle Kingdom, China, rendered large and authoritative, with Korea itself prominently placed to the east. This reflects a traditional Sino-centric worldview, the cultural and political universe as understood from Seoul. But then your eye travels outward to the edges of the silk, and the map's true significance emerges. To the west, beyond the mountains and deserts, the cartographers have drawn a vast continent. It is stylized, its shapes smoothed and simplified by the brush, yet undeniably familiar. A great triangular landmass points south, with a distinctive westward bulge along its northern coast. This is Africa. To its north, a smaller, complex peninsula represents the Arabian Peninsula, and curling above it, the sprawling, indistinct shape of Europe. The Kangnido shows the world from Portugal to Japan on a single, continuous sheet, decades before Portuguese ships would round the Cape of Good Hope. How was this possible? The map's own history provides the answer. It was compiled from earlier Chinese and, most crucially, Islamic sources. Geographical knowledge from the great Muslim scholars, the works of people like Al-Idrisi, had traveled the length of the Silk Road, carried by merchants, diplomats, and scholars across Central Asia. This information was then synthesized and translated by Korean cartographers, who incorporated it into their own cosmological framework. The Kangnido, therefore, is not a record of Korean exploration, but of Korean scholarship. It is proof that by the start of the 15th century, a sophisticated understanding of the Eastern Hemisphere, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, existed in Asian libraries. It completely upends the simplistic timeline that suggests global geography was unveiled solely by European caravels. Here was a holistic, integrated view of the Old World, drawn in Korea, based on Arabic science, years before Columbus or Da Gama were even born. It presents a world already deeply interconnected by the flow of ideas, if not yet by regular sea travel. This map challenges us to expand our imagination of the medieval globe, to see it not as a collection of isolated civilizations, but as a network where knowledge could travel thousands of miles overland, slowly compiling a complete picture of the planet. Yet, for all its sweeping scope, the Kangnido also contains a curious, specific omission that speaks volumes. While it depicts Africa's northern coast and general shape with remarkable clarity, the southern tip of the continent is rounded off, closed. There is no opening to a southern ocean. This reflects the limits of the Islamic geographical knowledge it relied upon, which knew Africa was large, but had not yet confirmed it could be circumnavigated. The map shows both the astounding reach and the distinct boundaries of pre-modern global understanding. It is a snapshot of a world almost fully mapped in the mind, awaiting the final, physical proofs of connection. From this grand, scholarly view of continents, our focus narrows to a single, enigmatic coastline that appears not in Asia, but on the other side of the world, in the work of a man who never sailed a day in his life. The Kangnido presented a world already understood in the East, but in the libraries of 15th century Europe, a different ancient text was sparking a revolution. It was not a map of new lands, but a mathematical framework for the entire world. The work of Claudius Ptolemy, a Greco-Roman scholar from the 2nd century, had been preserved and expanded upon in the Islamic world for over 1,000 years. When his text, the Geographia, was translated from Arabic into Latin around 1410, it landed in the minds of European thinkers like a detonator. Ptolemy had never seen the Americas. His map ended at the Canary Islands in the west. His genius was not in discovery, but in system. He introduced the concepts of latitude and longitude, a grid of coordinates that could, in theory, plot the position of any place on Earth. He provided coordinates for thousands of known locations from Britain to Sri Lanka. For Renaissance scholars, this was a revelation. The world was not just a collection of stories, it was a measurable, calculable space. This Ptolemaic system gave explorers and cartographers a shared language, a scientific method for recording where they had been, and more importantly, predicting what lay beyond. Christopher Columbus, for instance, studied Ptolemy closely, though he famously misinterpreted the size of the Earth, believing Asia was much closer sailing west than Ptolemy's own data suggested. Yet the influence went deeper than navigation. Later printed editions of Ptolemy's Geographia, especially after the discovery of the New World, began to include what are called tabulae nova, new maps. Cartographers still working within the revered Ptolemaic framework would add their latest findings to supplements in the back of the book, and in some of these new maps drawn in the 1500s, we see speculative landmasses placed in the vast southern Atlantic and Indian Oceans. These were not copies of ancient knowledge, they were Renaissance guesses inserted into the margins of an ancient text. Some have looked at these shapes, these ghostly southern continents sketched by men like Gerardus Mercator, and tried to connect them tenuously to Antarctica or a premonition of Australia. But that misses the true power of the Ptolemaic revival. These maps represent the moment the ancient world handed the future a key. Ptolemy provided the blank grid, the structured emptiness that cried out to be filled. His work created an intellectual hunger, a confident belief that the world could be mapped in its entirety because a man from Alexandria had provided the instructions 15 centuries prior. The age of discovery was not just driven by better ships, it was propelled by a resurrected idea, a belief that the unknown was not a formless void, but a set of empty coordinates waiting for a name. This conceptual shift from mystery to measurable space makes the next map all the more bewildering because it appears to present not a theoretical blank, but a specific, impossible detail already filled in. Gerardus Mercator's name is synonymous with the map projection that still charts our world today, but his own masterwork from 1569 holds a secret that has nothing to do with navigation. In the swirling, distorted center of his Arctic, he drew a curious and specific feature, a massive black rock, labeled Rups Nigra, rising from the sea at the very North Pole. Mercator did not invent this detail. In a note, he explained he took it from a now-lost travelogue written in the 1300s by an explorer from Oxford. This mysterious book described the pole not as a point of ice, but as a sea surrounding a great magnetic mountain of black stone, 33 miles in circumference. Ships that sailed too close, the account warned, would be pulled toward it by an irresistible force, their iron nails torn from their hulls. To our modern understanding, this is pure myth. We know the geographic North Pole is a point on a shifting sea of ice, not a towering rock. Yet Mercator, a brilliant scientific mind, included it with conviction. Why would a man dedicated to precise mathematical cartography give space to such a fable? The answer reveals a deeper truth about these ancient maps. They were not just records of coastlines, they were canvases for the entire human understanding of the world, a blend of hard-won data and deeply held belief. The concept of Rups Nigra was not mere fantasy, it was a medieval scientific hypothesis. Scholars of the time knew compass needles pointed north, but they had no concept of planetary magnetic fields. The idea of a giant lodestone, a physical magnet at the top of the world, was a perfectly rational, even elegant, explanation for the phenomenon. It was a theory that made the invisible force of magnetism visible and placeable on a map. Mercator's inclusion of the black rock shows us that the boundary between science and folklore was porous. A map could simultaneously chart a coastline with stunning accuracy for sailors, while also illustrating the best philosophical guess for why their compasses worked. It was a holistic document meant to explain the world in all its aspects, the seen and the unseen, the proven and the proposed. The Rups Nigra reminds us that every era has its own logic, its own way of filling the blanks on the chart with the stories it needs to make sense of the universe. This beautiful interweaving of observation and legend does not diminish these maps, it enriches them, turning them into cultural portraits of the minds that made them. And no culture's portrait is more steeped in seafaring legend than that of the Polynesians, whose understanding of the ocean was mapped not on parchment, but in the mind itself. The concept of a magnetic mountain guiding sailors is a powerful metaphor, but for the true masters of the open ocean, navigation was an art woven from memory, stars, and the language of the sea itself. Across the vast Pacific, Polynesian voyagers explored and settled islands scattered across millions of square miles of water, a feat of exploration unmatched in human history. They did this without compasses, without written charts, and without the concept of being lost at sea. Their map was not drawn on parchment, but encoded in a living system called wayfinding. This was a holistic science passed orally from master navigator to apprentice. It involved memorizing the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, reading the subtle patterns of ocean swells refracted around unseen islands, observing the flight paths of birds at dusk, and noting the colors and cloud formations that hinted at distant land. A master navigator held a mental chart of the entire Pacific, a cognitive map built from generations of accumulated observation and daring voyages. This knowledge was so precise, so reliable, that it allowed for intentional two-way voyages across unimaginable distances, like the legendary settlement of Hawaii from the Marquesas or the discovery of New Zealand. The Polynesian achievement forces us to radically redefine what a map is. It demonstrates that geographical knowledge can exist in a non-physical, yet perfectly functional form, a living library carried in the mind and shared through song and story. It represents a parallel path of discovery, one that succeeded not through instruments and stolen charts, but through profound intimacy with the natural world. This deep, experiential understanding of the ocean stands in stark contrast to another, equally mysterious tradition of map-making that emerged from the enclosed waters of the Mediterranean, where knowledge was not carried in the mind, but meticulously inked onto the skins of animals. The mental maps of Polynesian wayfinders charted the living ocean, but in the royal court of a Norman king in Sicily, a different kind of synthesis was taking physical form. In the year 1154, the scholar Muhammad Al-Idrisi presented King Roger II with a masterpiece of silver and ink, a massive planisphere known as the Tabula Rogeriana. This was not the work of a single explorer, but the culmination of a global intellectual project. Al-Idrisi spent 15 years compiling reports from Islamic travelers, merchants, and diplomats whose networks stretched from the Atlantic coast of Spain to the distant ports of China. He interviewed them, cross-referenced their stories, and painstakingly translated their knowledge into a single, coherent vision of the world. The resulting map, oriented with south at the top, is a breathtaking mosaic of 12th century understanding. Cities, rivers, and mountain ranges are plotted with a detail that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. Its most profound correction to ancient wisdom lies in its depiction of the Indian Ocean. For over 1,000 years, the authority of Ptolemy had declared it a landlocked sea, enclosed by a southern continent that connected Africa to Asia. Al-Idrisi's sources knew better. Based on the direct experience of Arab and Persian sailors who regularly crossed its breadth, his map shows the Indian Ocean correctly as an open body of water, with sea routes leading onward. This was a monumental geographical truth, born not from theory but from trade. The Tabula Rogeriana represents a golden age of knowledge, a time when the Islamic world acted as the central clearinghouse for global geography. This sophisticated understanding, preserved in libraries from Baghdad to Cordoba, would later seep into Europe, providing a more accurate foundation for the voyages of da Gama and others. It stands as a powerful reminder that the European age of discovery did not emerge from a vacuum, but was built upon a vast, pre-existing scaffold of global knowledge, patiently assembled by cultures that had been connecting the world by land and sea for centuries. This raises a tantalizing possibility. If such a sophisticated network of information existed, capable of accurately mapping from Spain to China, could whispers of lands even farther west have also traveled along these same routes? South of the spice-laden islands of Indonesia, a phantom continent once haunted the charts of Europe. On his magnificent atlas presented to King Henry VIII of England in 1542, the French hydrographer Jean Rots drew a vast, mysterious land he called Java la Grande. Its placement is immediately puzzling, lying directly south of the real Java and stretching across an enormous swath of ocean. But the true mystery is not its location, it is its shape. When you look at the eastern coastline of this Java la Grande, a strange sense of recognition stirs. The contour, with its distinctive indentations and promontories, bears an uncanny, almost mirror image resemblance to the western coast of Australia, a landmass that would not be officially documented by Europeans for another 60 years, with the Dutch landing in 1606. So what exactly was Jean Rots mapping? The most straightforward explanation is that Java la Grande is a cartographic chimera, a mismapped and grossly enlarged version of the Indonesian island of Java itself, perhaps conflated with vague reports of other islands or even the southern coast of New Guinea. In an era when longitude was a guessing game and distances at sea were notoriously difficult to calculate, such colossal errors were commonplace. A sailor's estimate of a coastline could be stretched and distorted through repeated copying, eventually solidifying into a major landmass on a royal chart. Yet the tantalizing alignment with Australia's west coast is difficult to dismiss entirely. It raises the persistent, haunting possibility of secret voyages. We know Portuguese ships were aggressively probing the edges of the known world in the early 1500s, pushing past the Spice Islands into the unknown eastern seas. Could a caravel, blown off course by the fierce trade winds, have been driven onto the barren shores of Western Australia? If such a landing occurred, the captain would have seen a dry, seemingly endless land lacking the immediate wealth of spices or gold. For the Portuguese, focused on the lucrative trade routes of the Indies, this discovery might have been noted as a navigational hazard, a lee shore to be avoided, rather than a prize to be announced. That single, unrecorded sighting could have entered the stream of clandestine geographical intelligence, passed from Portuguese pilots to French cartographers like Rots in the whispered exchanges of port taverns. The map becomes a snapshot of that shadowy information network. Java la Grande is not necessarily a perfect map of Australia, but it could be a ghost, a distorted echo of a real coastline glimpsed once and then imperfectly remembered, its scale and orientation twisted in the retelling. This enigma perfectly captures the fragmentary, competitive, and often second-hand nature of geographical knowledge during the Age of Discovery. Maps were not just records, they were puzzles assembled from stolen glimpses, sailors' yarns, and deliberate misinformation. Java la Grande stands as a beautiful testament to that uncertainty, a half-formed idea of a continent waiting in the southern sea, its true identity blurred by the fog of distance and rivalry. This ghost of a southern land forces us to look for more concrete evidence, to shift our search from ambiguous coastlines to the very substance of the earth. While the phantom coastlines of Java la Grande speak of whispers and lost voyages, the oldest surviving map in the world was drawn for a purpose far more concrete than speculation. In the dusty stillness of the Egyptian Museum in Turin rests a fragile papyrus, its ink lines tracing a landscape over 3,000 years old. Created around 1150 BCE, the Turin papyrus map is not a chart of oceans or continents. It is a detailed, practical guide to the mineral wealth of the eastern desert. This ancient document meticulously plots the wadis, or dry riverbeds, leading to gold mines and quarries of Beckhan stone, a prized material for statues. It marks the locations of miners' settlements, water sources, and even the size of the gold deposits, rendered in careful hieratic script. This is not a symbolic or cosmological drawing. It is a functional topographical map born from the administrative needs of a powerful state. Its existence is a quiet revolution in our understanding of history. Long before Ptolemy theorized about coordinates, and centuries before the first Greek periplus was drafted, Egyptian scribes were surveying desert routes and representing three-dimensional terrain on a two-dimensional surface with startling accuracy. They understood scale, they annotated distances, they conveyed practical information with a clarity that feels remarkably modern. The Turin Papyrus serves as a crucial anchor in our journey. It proves beyond any doubt that the sophisticated cartographic impulse, the drive to record our world in a useful, spatial form, is not a product of the Renaissance or the Age of Discovery. It is a fundamental human technology, as ancient as civilization itself. This realization casts all the other maps we have examined in a new and humbling light. If the Egyptians were producing such advanced working maps in the 12th century BCE, what might other contemporary cultures, from the Minoans to the Mesopotamians, have been drawing on their own clay tablets or perishable scrolls? The true, staggering mystery is not that a few anomalous maps survived, but that nearly all of them vanished. The material culture of mapmaking, especially on fragile mediums like papyrus, linen, or wood, is incredibly vulnerable to time, climate, and conflict. The Turin Papyrus itself is a rare, miraculous survivor. Its survival forces a haunting question upon us. What other geographical knowledge, what other charts of coastlines or trade routes from deep antiquity have been irrevocably lost, taking their secrets with them forever? This contemplation of a silent, fragmented past brings us sharply into the present, to a map whose very authenticity is the center of a fierce and modern debate. The fragile papyrus map is a testament to knowledge preserved, but some charts exist in a state of perpetual uncertainty, their truth contested by the very science meant to confirm it. The Vineland Map, that tantalizing sketch of a Norse New World, has never escaped this storm of scrutiny. Its story is a masterclass in how the authentication of history is not a single verdict, but an ongoing debate where each new piece of evidence rewrites the narrative. For decades, the central charge against the map has been its ink. In 2021, a team of scientists using advanced spectroscopic techniques made a compelling case. They found that the ink contained significant amounts of titanium, not in a natural mineral form, but as a synthetic compound consistent with pigments produced in the 1920s. This finding seemed to deliver a final, scientific blow, suggesting a forger had skillfully used a modern ink on genuinely old parchment to create a sensational fake. The motive for such an elaborate deception is not hard to fathom. In the mid-20th century, on the eve of the Columbus quincentenary, a map proving Norse precedents would have been a historical bombshell, worth a fortune and capable of reshaping a national origin story. The desire for such a narrative, for a tangible link to the Viking sagas, could have driven a brilliant fraud. Yet, as with all things surrounding this parchment, the story is not so simple. Earlier studies, including one from 2002, had reached a different conclusion. That analysis argued the ink's chemical composition was consistent with medieval iron gall recipes, and that the problematic titanium could be explained as a common contaminant from the sand used to dry the wet ink, or even from centuries of microscopic degradation. This stark disagreement among experts is not a sign of failure, but a revelation of the process itself. It shows that scientific analysis is often a matter of interpretation, of weighing one set of data against another, and of understanding how an artifact changes over 500 years. The map's own biography adds layers of intrigue. It emerged not from an archaeological dig, but from the opaque world of the rare book trade, its provenance before 1957 frustratingly vague. This lack of a clear chain of custody is a red flag for any historian. The debate forces us to confront a difficult question: is our analysis driven by a cold reading of the evidence, or are we, as a culture, subconsciously hoping for the map to be real or perhaps for it to be fake? The Vineland Map, regardless of its ultimate origin, teaches a critical lesson about extraordinary claims. It shows that the burden of proof lies not with skeptics to disprove a marvel, but with the artifact to prove itself beyond a reasonable doubt through every available test. This rigorous, often frustrating process is the bedrock of historical understanding. It protects us from the allure of a story that feels too good to be true, while remaining open to the possibility that truth can be stranger than any fiction. This forensic dance between hope and evidence stands in stark contrast to a map whose power lies not in historical proof, but in its breathtaking, otherworldly beauty. While the Vineland Map stands in a storm of scientific dispute, another Renaissance document offers a vision of staggering, undisputed ambition. In 1587, a Milanese nobleman and scholar named Urbano Monti completed a work of cartography unlike any other. His Planisphere was not a single sheet, but a colossal atlas of 60 individual pages, designed to be joined together into a circle nearly 10 feet across. Its central revolutionary idea was its perspective. Monti drew the world not from the side but from directly above, as if gazing down upon the North Pole. This polar projection, a concept far ahead of its time, allowed him to present the entire globe as a continuous, unbroken disk, with the southern continents radiating outward like the petals of a vast geographical flower. The map is a breathtaking tapestry of everything known and everything imagined at the close of the 16th century. He integrated the latest reports from Spanish and Portuguese voyages in the Americas and Asia, sketching coastlines with the confident detail of a man who had studied every available account. Yet he also filled the great southern oceans with the speculative landmasses of Terra Australis, rendering them not as blank voids, but as fully realized kingdoms, complete with cities, rivers, and invented monarchs. For Urbano Monti, this was not deception, it was completion. His map was an attempt to impose harmony, to weave the chaotic flood of new discoveries into a single, elegant, and intellectually satisfying whole. It represents the pinnacle of Renaissance curiosity, a moment when one man believed he could compile all the world's knowledge onto a single, magnificent page. It is a portrait of the human mind trying to create order from an explosion of information, filling the gaps not with forgery, but with educated, artistic conjecture. This drive to find hidden order and connection in the world often flowed into more secretive channels, leading to maps that were not just records of land, but diagrams of esoteric belief. Urbano Monti's attempt to create a single, perfect map from all known sources points to a deeper, more haunting reality. For every chart that survived, countless others vanished. The Piri Reis map, with its impossible coastline, offers a direct clue to this loss. In his own meticulous notes, the admiral stated he consulted 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Those original documents are gone, leaving only their ghostly imprint on his 1513 compilation. Their disappearance is not an isolated incident, it is part of a historical catastrophe. The great libraries of the ancient world, like the legendary institution at Alexandria or the imperial collections of Constantinople, were not just repositories of philosophy and poetry. They almost certainly housed geographical archives, maps drawn from the logs of Phoenician merchants who may have circumnavigated Africa, Egyptian expeditions sailing the Red Sea, and Babylonian astronomers calculating distances across the known world. These were centers of global knowledge where the coastlines of entire continents could have been pieced together from reports gathered over centuries of trade and exploration. The destruction of these libraries, whether by fire, war, or neglect, represents an incalculable loss. It is the burning of the world's memory. When we look at a map like Piri Reis's, we are not necessarily looking at a singular anomaly. We might be looking at a rare, fragmented copy of a much older consensus, a surviving whisper from a vast conversation about the world that was silenced. The 20 ancient maps we discussed today, then, take on a new and sobering significance. They are not necessarily 20 individual mysteries, but 20 scattered survivors. They are the few pages that fluttered from a burning library, each bearing a piece of a story we can no longer read in full. They hint at a cartographic tradition of immense sophistication and global reach that has been almost entirely erased, leaving behind only these provocative, disconnected clues. This perspective transforms our entire quest. We are not just hunting for proof of pre-Columbian voyages or ice-free Antarctica. We are attempting to reconstruct a lost bookshelf from a handful of surviving titles, trying to hear an epic poem from a few surviving lines. The true map of the ancient world may have been far more complete and far more accurate than we have ever dared to believe. Its absence is the greatest historical mystery of all. From this contemplation of vast, silent libraries, we turn to a single stone artifact, a map you can touch, whose carved lines tell a story no one has yet fully deciphered. The silent libraries of antiquity leave no physical trace, but across the Atlantic, a different kind of map is carved in stone. In the rolling hills of Minnesota, a weathered slab of greywacke bears a series of grooves and markings known as the Kensington Runestone. Discovered in 1898 by a Swedish immigrant farmer, the stone tells a story in runic script of Norse explorers who ventured inland in the year 1362, only to meet with tragedy. For over a century, this artifact has been at the heart of a fierce and emotional debate, one that extends far beyond the stone itself to the very idea of pre-Columbian maps of North America. Proponents see it as a literal, carved record, a waypoint left by lost Vikings that could imply a broader, uncharted knowledge of the continent's interior waterways. They point to other, more obscure finds, like the alleged rune stones in Oklahoma or Maine, sometimes called map stones for their seemingly purposeful lines, suggesting routes or landmarks. To believers, these stones are not random scratches, but a form of cartography for a people without paper, a durable message left for others or for the gods. The emotional pull is powerful, offering a tangible, dramatic connection to the Viking sagas right in the American heartland. Yet, the mainstream academic and linguistic consensus is overwhelmingly skeptical. Detailed analysis of the Kensington Runestone's runes and language reveals anomalies inconsistent with 14th century Old Norse, showing instead a mix of dialects and modern influences. Most archaeologists note the complete absence of any corroborating physical evidence, no settlements, no tools, no burials that would support such a sustained inland expedition. The stone exists in an historical vacuum. This stark divide transforms the artifact from a potential map into a mirror, reflecting our own cultural desires. It becomes a cautionary tale about the human need to find pattern and meaning, especially in marks on stone. The idea of a lost map carved by Norsemen taps into a deep folklore, a longing for a more ancient, epic origin story for the continent, one that predates the familiar narratives of Columbus or Jamestown. This longing can sometimes override critical scrutiny, turning ambiguous markings into conclusive proof. Examining these claims critically does not diminish the mystery of transoceanic contact, but rather refines it. It asks us to hold two truths at once. The first is that legitimate, proven Norse settlements existed in Newfoundland at Elance Ox Meadows, proving the capability for such voyages. The second is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and a single, contested stone, without a supporting archaeological landscape, cannot bear the weight of rewriting history. The lesson of the stone map is not about Vikings but about us. It teaches the discipline of separating the seductive story from the verifiable fact, and in doing so, it clarifies what a true historical mystery actually looks like. It is not a solitary anomaly, but a pattern of evidence that withstands the most rigorous tests. This careful sifting of evidence brings us to the final, and perhaps most visually stunning, artifact in our collection, a map that captures the moment one age of understanding ended and another began. By the 1770s, a new kind of map was being drawn, one born from the disciplined gaze of scientific exploration. Captain James Cook's voyages across the Pacific were not journeys into the unknown for the sake of myth, they were systematic surveys. His charts, like those of the eastern coast of Australia or the icy fringes of Antarctica, were meticulously drafted from direct observation, celestial navigation, and precise measurement. They replaced the swirling dragons and phantom continents of earlier charts with coastlines defined by latitude and longitude, by soundings and bearings. These maps represent a turning point, the moment when the cartographic image of our world finally began to align with its physical reality. They give us a solid baseline, a definitive record of what was truly there at the dawn of the modern age. And it is against this baseline that the older maps we have examined become so profoundly strange. Place Cook's crisp, accurate chart of Australia's recognizable outline next to the speculative blob of Java La Grande. Lay his sketch of the Antarctic ice barrier over the detailed river systems of the Oronce Phineas map. The gap seems absolute, a chasm between fantasy and fact. The older maps appear, in this harsh light, to be pure products of imagination, their occasional startling accuracies dismissed as nothing more than incredible luck. Yet this very comparison forces a deeper, more unsettling line of inquiry. If these ancient charts were merely guesswork, why do their most puzzling features so often align with truths that would not be verified for centuries? Why does a speculative southern continent sometimes mirror the subglacial bedrock beneath the ice? The existence of Cook's definitive maps does not erase the mystery of the older ones, it sharpens it to a fine point. It presents us with two distinct models of discovery. One is the official, linear history, a story of gradual, recorded exploration that fills in the blank spaces over time. The other is a shadow history, suggested by fragments, where knowledge appears, vanishes, and then resurfaces in cryptic forms, long before the official record says it should exist. Cook's maps mark the end of one era of speculation, but they also, perhaps, mark the beginning of our modern confusion. They give us the comforting illusion that the map is now complete, that all the coastlines are known and all the mysteries solved. But what they truly reveal is the final, overarching question that has been building through all 20 of these ancient charts. The question is not simply whether a particular map shows a real place. The deeper, more compelling question is this: what does it mean when a map is right for the wrong reasons, or when it holds a truth that its own creator could not possibly have verified? This is the enduring puzzle that hangs in the air long after the last coastline was surveyed, a whisper from the past that suggests our understanding of history itself might still have a few blank spaces left to fill. So we are left with a gallery of enigmas, a collection of coastlines that seem to know too much. The final step is not to choose a single map, but to step back and ask, what overarching story could possibly make sense of them all? Three powerful theories emerge from the shadows of history, each offering a different key to the puzzle. The first is the most extraordinary. It suggests these maps are surviving fragments from a prehistoric civilization of global seafarers, a culture like Atlantis or another advanced society lost to the great floods of time. In this view, the precise outlines of an ice-free Antarctica or the correct shape of land bridges are not guesses. They are direct copies from master charts drafted when those features were visible to human eyes. This theory provides a clean, elegant explanation for the deepest anomalies, but it rests on a profound absence. There is no archaeological evidence, no sunken cities, no tool assemblages, no cultural continuity to support such a widespread, sophisticated civilization. It solves the cartographic riddle by invoking a historical phantom, a civilization that left maps but left nothing else behind. The second theory is one of brilliant human deduction. It argues that medieval and Renaissance scholars were far more capable than we often credit. By synthesizing scattered sailors' reports, classical texts, and their own theories of symmetry and geography, men like Orontius Phineus or Philippe Buache could make startlingly accurate, educated guesses. A river on a southern continent might be a logical assumption of what a large landmass should contain, not a memory of what it did contain. This theory is satisfyingly human, celebrating the power of the intellect to envision the world. Yet it struggles with the specific, uncanny alignments, like a guessed river valley matching the subglacial topography discovered with 20th century technology. Can luck really be that consistent? The third theory occupies a compelling middle ground. It proposes that many of these maps record genuine voyages that history simply forgot. We know the Phoenicians circumnavigated Africa. We know the Polynesians settled the Pacific. We know the Norse reached North America. What if their journeys, or those of others like them, were more extensive than our records show? A Chinese treasure ship blown off course, a Roman galley caught in an Atlantic storm, a Persian merchant venturing beyond his usual routes, any of these could have glimpsed a new coastline. That single sighting, reported in a logbook or a traveler's tale, could enter the stream of geographical gossip, becoming distorted over centuries but retaining a kernel of truth. This theory has the advantage of being grounded in the proven capabilities of ancient and medieval cultures. It does not require a lost super-civilization, only the acknowledgement that our historical record is a patchwork with immense silent gaps. In the end, the most honest answer is likely a tapestry woven from all these threads. Some features are lucky guesses born from brilliant deduction. Others are distorted echoes of real, unrecorded contacts. A few may even be deliberate forgeries or artistic flourishes. And yes, the possibility remains that one or two hold a secret we have not yet fully understood. This analytical framework does not give us a single, satisfying answer. Instead, it gives us something more valuable, a way to think about the mystery. It prepares us to move from analysis to a final, broader reflection on what these maps truly mean, not as historical documents, but as messages about the nature of discovery itself. These maps do not offer a single, simple answer, and perhaps that is their greatest gift. They are not meant to be solved like equations, but to be pondered like poems. Each one is a testament to the restless human spirit, a fragment of a conversation about our world that spans millennia. They force us to confront a humbling truth: our recorded history is not the full story. It is merely the version that survived, the loudest narrative shouted down through the centuries, while countless whispers have faded into silence. What these charts preserve are the echoes of those whispers. They show us that the drive to explore, to chart the unknown, and to share that knowledge is a fundamental thread in the human tapestry, one that connects an Ottoman admiral in Constantinople, a Korean scholar in Seoul, and a Polynesian navigator reading the stars on the open ocean. This interconnected urge, more than any single coastline, is the real discovery. It reshapes our understanding of the past not as a straight line, but as a vast, branching network of curiosity, where breakthroughs could be made, lost, and independently remade across time and culture. So the next time you look at a modern map with every mountain range and ocean trench neatly defined, remember the ghost maps that lie beneath it. Remember the phantom islands, the speculative continents, and the coastlines drawn from rumor. They are not mere errors, they are the necessary drafts of our understanding, the beautiful, flawed, and courageous attempts to answer the oldest question of all: what is out there? The search for that answer, with all its dead ends and stunning leaps of insight, is the true story these 20 artifacts tell. And if they have stirred your own curiosity, we would love to hear which map captured your imagination the most. Share your thoughts below and join us as we continue to explore the deepest mysteries history has to offer.